our chat with Lisa McLean. Let's talk about the rest of the political week now with Stephen Henderson from Detroit Today at WDET and Nolan Finley from the Detroit News. Guys, thanks very much for the time. Nolan, let me start with you. What was your takeaway from what happened in the primary, aside from how long it took us to count the votes?
Well, tremendous turnout, right? And, you know, it seemed like mail-in voting worked. We're in an era where it's going to take longer to count votes. If people are now going to vote by mail, and I think this is a change that'll persist long after COVID disappears, we've got to get used to not having the instant gratification on election night. Instead of tuning into at 11 to get the results, we might have to wait for Rhonda in the morning to know what happened.
Exactly. Or I'm going to have to change my shift. Stephen, what were your thoughts about what we saw?
So I was also struck by the turnout. I think, and we've seen that already earlier this year. I think that says the November elections, we're going to see really, really high voting, and that does not necessarily bode well for the President of the United States, whose strategy, I think, is to make sure that people don't vote, that more people don't vote. The other thing that I really took away from the election was the win by Rashida Tlaib in her congressional district. Brenda Jones, Detroit City Council president, I think had as good a shot as anybody did, given the demographics of that district and the fact that she was the only other candidate running against. She got beat 2-1. That says a lot about that district. It also says a lot about Rashida Tlaib and the job that she has done endearing herself to the constituents who live there.
Really true, Nolan, because I think conventional wisdom was that if there hadn't been such a big field of candidates, Brenda Jones would have been able to win that seat the last time around.
Yeah, and that was 2 years ago. I agree with Steve up to a point, but, you know, I write in today's column that this is going to be a very hard year for challengers to unseat incumbents. COVID-19 has just turned campaigning upside down. Incumbents have the advantage of an established fundraising network, good voter list already in place, an organization already in place. I don't think you're going to see many incumbents turned out in the fall election.
Is it too much to ask of the legislature? Jocelyn Benson, to get back to the mail-in voting, really would like to be able to at least open these ballots as they arrive to see whether or not they're a spoiled ballot, one that should be counted on Election Day. Couldn't we get our election workers a head start, or should we wait to open them until Election Day? Nolan, you first.
I think you need processes in place to do that. I mean, you don't want to have a situation where the results start leaking out at 10 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon and impact voter turnout and the way people vote. I think you need security processes in place, safeguards. We don't have that yet. And would it be a good idea if they acted to start putting those things in place? Yeah, but it's not going to happen by November.
Stephen?
Yeah, I think you absolutely have to make it so that ballots that arrive on Election Day or that are postmarked on Election Day are counted. I think the idea of disenfranchising people because of the mail, that really worries me. And in a state where you're going to have heavy voting, we're talking about a lot of people whose votes would not count. I don't think that makes any sense.
Not so much a matter of counting them early, but at least maybe open them to prepare them for the count. The last thing I wanted to make sure we got to, the governor this week in her declaration that racism is a public health crisis. Nolan, it didn't take very long at all for me to hear from white Michiganders who took that, when she said that everybody has a bias, they took that as being told that they were inherently racist. Is that the way you heard that?
Well, I don't know why that would surprise anybody. I mean, I think that's been the message. My concern about this order, I think its goals are good, and clearly racism does affect public health. We saw that during the COVID crisis. I'm just reluctant for her to seize any more emergency power or crisis power, given how she's used it unilaterally so far, the power she's had. I mean, is she going to use this to put new policies in place that should go through the legislature? I think we have to wait and see how she uses this public health crisis declaration before we judge it one way or the other.
Stephen, we've got less than a minute left. Your thoughts on this? There are some actionables here, but to some people, this is kind of like declaring war on poverty. That it's sort of one of those really difficult things to shape, even though it sounds good rhetorically.
Yeah, I think you got to watch real closely for what comes out of this, what changes in the lives of Black and brown people in this state because of this. It's great to have this council formed who'll have the governor's ear, and hopefully will have the legislature's ear, but we need them to change policy. And, I don't know that that's going to be done by executive order. I think it will be done through the legislature, but elevating it to this point and making clear that this is a public health crisis for the state is huge and has been a long time coming. And I think she deserves a lot of credit for taking that step.
Guys, always great to talk to you. Thanks so much for the time, and we'll see you next on a future episode of Flashpoint. Thanks. Thank you so much for being here as well. Meet the Press coming up next. Have a great week. We'll see you next time on Flashpoint.